and what you're building towards? Do you have any money rules?
That is also another good question. One of the ones, thinking off the top of my head here, that would probably be good would be the idea of a rule, really, don't be cheap. And what I mean by don't be cheap is that you should know the difference between being cheap and being efficient and budget-minded. So cheap would be, for example, we're talking about real estate, would be buying the cheapest possible doors that you can for a house that you're fixing up.
Right.
Just totally not even wanting to spend any more than you absolutely have to, or in another case, going as cheap as you possibly can on finding an attorney, someone to help you if you're incorporating with a LLC or another entity.
Yeah,
so just try to do it all.
That may be cheap on the front end, but not the back end.
Absolutely, yeah. And so you really think that you're being clever, and you think that, I'm saving a couple bucks and this is really going to help. But then in the long run, and maybe in some cases it would work, maybe you really do manage to get it right. But in other cases, if you end up getting sued, or as often happens, you just miss something because you just don't know what you don't know, that kind of cheapness can really come back to bite you. Versus on the other side of that, what we were talking about, the other term, being cost-effective, being budget-minded, that is advisable. That is, for example, something as simple as when you leave your office, turn off the lights. Like, it sounds so basic, but over time, that kind of an expense can just add up. Or if you are somewhere and you can walk and it makes sense to walk, then you might be better off health-wise walking or taking the stairs versus the elevator, that kind of thing. So know the difference between being smart with money and being dumb in an attempt to cut corners. Another example of being kind of money, I guess the proper phrase your listeners might have heard is penny wise, pound foolish, right?
Yeah.
So another example would be, and I've seen this unfortunately, people who go to a coffee shop, they walk to a coffee shop a couple of blocks away from the office, they're there and it starts to rain. It doesn't just rain, it pours. So rather than spend a couple of bucks on a taxi cab to get back to the office, get right back to work, they're going to wait this thing out. That would be an example of really not thinking smart in terms of your money.
Absolutely. That was very well said. Thank you. That was an awesome answer. Final question, and then maybe you could fill our listeners in on how they might be able to find out more about you and how you help real estate investors. But you're a 30-something now. Can you talk a little bit about how your views on money changed now that you're a 30-something and you've been in the business world for a bit now?
Yeah, I think that some of the ways my views have changed have certainly been on the need to invest in proper resources, whether that's what we were talking about with attorneys and materials, investing in education too. Education is one of those things that seems like, I can get it for free on the internet, or I can just go to the public library. But in some cases, there really are resources out there that you need to invest in order to get access to, whether that's coaching or mentoring. And that would be one aspect of it. Certainly the whole cheap versus budget-minded thing we just talked about, that would be another thing. And then I
that's
think
something that evolved. I'm sorry to cut you off. That's something that evolved. So the previous rule you had as a 22-year-old, you might not have viewed it the same way as now. It's 10 years later. I don't know exactly how old you are. But you've kind of grown into that attitude. It's not something that you came out of college with?
No, it isn't. It really isn't, especially being in the sort of the coming from a more millennial background, in that I can just get this for free on the internet. And there's really that unfortunate view among many people who are on the younger side these days that they can just get things for free. And I'm not going to pay for that. Well, sometimes you actually do have to pay for stuff. And if you have to pay for stuff, oftentimes there's a reason for that because it really is valuable, especially in the case of education.
Yeah, very well said. So thank you so much. This was as good a discussion as I had hoped for, Nick. Very good information. I wish we had a lot more time, as it probably comes across to you and listeners. This is an area I'm passionate about. I think it's fascinating and really important information. So thanks so much. For listeners that might want to get more information about you, including your excellent podcast, how can they do so?
Sure, the couple of places they could go, if they're interested in my book publishing service, where I help entrepreneurs and real estate investors to get their own book in just 7 hours of their time, the best place to go for that would be contentcorp.net, CONTENTCORPS.net. And if they're interested in the podcast, which you yourself, Chris, are actually going to be a guest coming up, they can hear your episode and others at 7 Rules for Real Estate Investing is the show name, and 7rulespodcast.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening. For me, please know that you could go to www.elliottwealth.com to get information about my financial planning practice and the rest of the team that helps me help clients win with money. You could subscribe to the podcast there. We have a monthly mailing. You could also sign up for a complimentary initial consultation. So I will be back on an upcoming episode very soon. Again, Nick, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Chris. Pleasure being on the show.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.
Simply Financial is part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find Exvadio podcasts at exvadio.com/podcast, the Apple Podcasts app, iTunes Store, iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. So join us and stay informed and entertained.